things are luring boys in, because it's not just Andrew Tate saying that, it's the world. I can't think my way to good action. I have to act my way to good thinking. I said to him, Dad, two choices. Grief for the disconnection between myself and my dad that I had never really acknowledged. And it's not just me and my dad, you know, after speaking to him, it's him and his dad, right? It's my granddad and his dad. And we go back. You know, my dad got an I love you from his dad once, I think a couple of weeks before he passed away. Wow, I've had way more than that in these last 2 years with my dad. And I'll finish on this, and same with my mum. It's incredible what's happening, but this story sums it up. I'm sat with my dad in a coffee place, you know, we're having a coffee, and it just occurred to me to ask him. I said, he's got a diagnosis, right? Advanced cancer at the moment. And I said to him, Dad, two choices. First one, you don't have cancer, you live a longer life, but you don't experience this connection that you and I have now. Or two, you do have cancer, you live a shorter life, but you do get to experience the connection that you and I have right now. Which one would you choose? And he just kind of smiled and he said, and maybe there was some slight nervousness there, I don't know, but he just said the latter. Wow. You know, and yeah, I teared up and I just thought, wow, like, I respect him, you know, I respect him. I really felt the respect. And I said to him the other day, and I said to my mum, I'm so lucky to have you as parents. So lucky to have you as parents. But to really, and they explain this at the Hoffman process, there's something called cheap forgiveness. And this blew my mind. I forgived my parents up here, and I'm pointing to my head. When I went out for a meal with my dad, emotionally down here in my gut, there was resentment. There was a disconnect. There was withdrawing. I didn't want to speak to him. Up here, I was like, he tried his best. So that's what Hoffman calls cheap forgiveness. Now, to get to embodied forgiveness, I needed to go through expressing rage in a safe container, accessing the grief. The grief is the real thing of the disconnection between myself and my parents.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. You talked about the point of, what's it? Oh, I've just had a mind blank. The self, where you're worrying about other people's views.
Right.
That's everything we seem to talk about on this podcast. In my opinion, the people that come on links back to, self-conscious. Apologies, everybody. Is people feeling self-conscious about what other people think of them, people not feeling like they're seen by other people, and people lacking a purpose. They were kind of always the three. There's always, I feel like on every episode, there's always a link to one of those three. What's your view on that?
Well, that's so lack of purpose and not feeling seen.
Yeah. And like being self-conscious of what other people think.
And being self-conscious. Yes. I think to me, you've got the existential component there. And Jamie alluded to this in the last episode about the spiritual side of things, right? And that's something I haven't really spoken about today, but I grew up as an atheist, let's say. And then in my early 20s, I described my kind of worldview as very nihilistic, right? Nothing means anything. And in going through these experiences, the way I describe it is my heart broke, but it broke open. And so
love that.
I really, yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, that's how it feels, right? There's like an opening, and gratitude started to come in. I started to feel grateful for stuff, and synchronicities started to happen. And I still have a part of me that's very skeptical about any sort of spiritual narratives that I hear. But ultimately that skeptic is a lot more relaxed because it's seen the data and the improvement of my mental health. That's the right. It's like quite scientific, this part of me. So it's like, I want data, you know, and this part of me can't, it just goes, right, there's something to it. That's what it knows right now and believes, right? There's something to this idea that there is something out there guiding me, or something within me guiding me, right? This sense of intuition. And I firmly believe that we have an intuitive self, that it is guiding us, and that through meditation, I can start to tune into that. So the purpose side of things for me came from going to the retreat, putting down the phone, listening to that intuition. And the intuition was almost like, what is life asking of me? Not what do I want from life? That was the acting, right? That was the Oscar. That's what I want. I want to feel that's going to help me to cope with life. Whereas now it's like a bit more open, a bit more asking, what is life asking of me right now? And it turns, I asked that to myself this morning before I came here, and a voice within me said to be grounded and enjoy it.
Love that. I wanted to touch on the work you're doing now in schools, etc. And do you think there's a part of you, because I sort of picture myself in school a lot, and I picture you standing up there in assembly chatting to me as my younger self. Do you think there's a part of you who is that sort of that schoolboy still, who wants to give something back to what you maybe didn't have when you were at school?
Definitely, Joe. Definitely. Yeah. I think there's a part of me that is I'm still working through a lot of the school stuff, and there's a part of me that could have really, really needed someone at school.
Yeah.
Coming in, talking about anxiety, talking about mental health, talking about what it's like to be in an environment where you feel self-conscious about BO and dandruff and all of these human things. And then to also have someone come in and say, there is a healthier way, possibly, of expressing masculinity. And this is what masculinity is. And here, take it or leave it. It's up to you. If you're curious, I can show you what's worked for me. And then, that would have really, really helped. And so you're right. I think I am definitely speaking to the younger part of me.
I love that. We're running out of time, but I really wanted to touch on, we mentioned Andrew Tate earlier, and you've done a documentary on him. I'm not sure when that's out, which will be amazing to see. What was the sort of documentary about, and your views on Andrew Tate as a whole? As I know he's quite a controversial character.
How long have we got?
Yeah, I was gonna, that face was for how much time? Because this is a whole, maybe we'll have
I wanted to add that in. I thought
yes, of course.
It was a great chat.
I'll try and give a kind of succinct thing, and then, if there's another time, happily to dive into
a whole hour to start.
Yeah, I think we do, don't we? Okay, so in my early 20s, I found myself watching content online that fueled my resentment towards the world. But it kind of relieved it as well, because the content said something like, this community does not care about you. And this community was, in my mind at that time, anything woke, quote unquote, and anything feminist, quote unquote. So at that time, when I was struggling with my mental health, there was this narrative online, there still is to some degree, and about male privilege and how men are oppressors and men have it a lot easier than women. And that used to really activate me, because I felt unseen. I was really struggling with my mental health. And then I'm listening to this content that goes, yeah, they don't like you. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think they do. Like, they don't. I like you. Come this way. Right? That's what the content was doing. And that's what Andrew Tate's doing. I believe. Right? That's my take on it. And yeah, there was this sense of direction that I got from it. Go to the gym, get the muscles, get the women. And it's really understandable how these things are luring boys in, because it's not just Andrew Tate saying that, it's the world, society. Right? We get this messaging all over the shop. Social media, movies, music. You get the girl, you make the muns, you have the business, right? You are a legend, or whatever it is, right? That's what I want it to be. You are a legend. And I still feel that in me now when I go to the gym, and I still feel that guy within me. So that to me is the first part. It's like having that awareness of what the man box is, and this idea of what a real man is, this idea of a man that I am trying to be, right? And Andrew Tate encapsulates a 14-year-old's view of masculinity, right? And I'm sure, and I hope you don't mind me including a we here, but we can understand as men what it was like to be a teenager before TikTok, right? What that would be like now. We would be listening to Andrew Tate, probably, right? the stats are there, we probably would. I know I would. And
yeah, definitely.
Right. So what's happening is that there's this polarization. Boys are being allured to the right because the right's saying we care about you, and girls and women are being moving towards the left on the political spectrum. And there's resentment in both ends. There's resentment towards the damage that what's being called traditional masculinity has caused to the world, or the man box. And there's a resentment from men towards the resentment, right? Yeah. And that's what the polarization is. So what happened to me was I was pointing my finger out at women and wokeism, and this content was helping me. Yeah. And it was this big finger point out, but I was stuck in my resentment towards the world. And I felt like I had a point, because it really does feel like the world hates men at times, right? It really does. And at the moment, there isn't any constructive conversation happening around what works about masculinity, what doesn't, how can we evolve? There are no alternatives being provided. So boys at school were receiving pressure from both ends.
So true.
Yeah.
Pressure to be a lad or a man from their peers, and pressure from teachers or society or women or girls to not be toxic, right? So it's confusing. And then Andrew Tate comes along on the phone, communicating it in such an articulate, very alluring, kind of very specific way that my brain is going to be able to process that so easily through TikTok, through entertainment videos, that whole package, that the message just seeps in. Do these things and you will get laid, or you'll be a man. Now, healthy masculinity turns out is a lot harder to sell, because it's far more ambiguous, because we haven't worked out exactly what it is. There isn't a formula. There isn't a do these 3 things and you'll be a healthy masculine man.
Yeah,
right?
So true.
So we're not there yet with that. And that's what I'm trying to do. That's my work. It's like, how can I communicate what it's like? And so what I lead with is my story. Ultimately, my mental health is so much better. This is how it's better. This is what I did. And this is what the man box is. This is how I view it. Do you resonate with that? You know, do you understand that there's a pressure to be a certain way? And if you do you want to opt out? Do you want to step outside of the box? And the final thing I'll say on that is, stepping outside of the box does not mean we have to leave everything behind within the box. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, for example, being stoic. There's nothing innately wrong with being stoic.
Yep.
However, being stoic in every moment, that's where it gets harmful. Let's say a crisis happens. In the crisis, stoicism may be really useful. When I get home after the crisis and I'm with my partner or my family, stoicism, probably not so much.
True.
That moment might call for some vulnerability. But vulnerability is outside of the box currently. So if we're in the box and confined by it, we don't feel like we can access that, meaning we have to cut ourselves off from all these other aspects of who we are. And so stepping outside of the box does not mean you will lose touch with your masculinity. It means that you will go through the process of discovering different ways to express it and express yourself. And so the question I always ask is, where would you be? What would you be interested in if you stepped outside the box?
Yeah, just really quickly, I just want to touch on something you just said, is if I'm a 14 to 16-year-old lad, and that's a really hard age for other boys, as you and I can testify to.
Oh, yeah.
Or for mums and dads who might be listening or watching this going, I've got a 14-year-old lad, I'd love to know how I can teach or guide my son down this road of how to be a good man, not in a toxic way, but also not in this way that we've been guided down by this sort of wokeism that you were talking about earlier. What would you say are the key things to sort of teach our young men now who might be slightly confused by this sort of being pulled to the left or pulled to the right thing? How do we go in the middle? What would you say?
Yeah, great question. I'm still working that out. But what I would say to that today is that young people tend to learn via osmosis more than they do this, right? So they learn more from Andrew Tate in his images of women and cigars and the muscles, probably, than they do from actually what he's saying some of the time. So what I would say to that is, it's like, how do we create a safe environment for our boys to express themselves, to experiment? The key is autonomy. If they want to go down that route, then that is their choice, fundamentally. However, how do I create a dynamic between me and my son so that he feels comfortable enough to express his opinions to me?
Right.
He's only going to feel comfortable enough to express his opinions to me if I'm engaging with him in a dynamic that keeps his autonomy intact, so that he knows if he expresses himself, he's not going to get shamed by me, right? I'm going to get curious. I was at a school recently, and it was the most amazing Q&A where I did and you never know what reception you're going to get. Did it, we got the Q&A, and then all the boys suddenly feel so excited. They're putting their arms up, they're going, yes, oh my God, what do you think when Big Top G said this, when what this? And I had one boy come up to me, he goes, do you think that smoking cigars increases your testosterone?
Yes.
It was, it was so,
I love that.
it was amazing. And I said, I paused and I said, I don't actually know. I haven't read any studies. My intuition is telling me no, but what do you think? And he said, I agree with you actually, but Top G said it, so I thought it was true. And in that moment, with me not judging him, and this is a moment where I've been able to do it, by the way, I just want to clarify, I don't do this every moment. If I've had my wits about me, if I'm regulated, then I know I can. And that's what I teach to staff and parents. It's that in that moment of him expressing his opinion and not feeling judged, we had a transformative conversation because I was able to offer mine, prompt him. And this is the thing that happened to me. My worldview expanded when all of a sudden I was in a space where I'm having a chat with someone who identifies as a feminist, where for the first time I became friends with someone who was non-binary. And then I started to have these conversations and I was like, oh my goodness, we're actually really alike in certain ways, right? And we're humans, and I can relate to you and you can relate to me. And in those conversations where I felt heard and seen and they felt heard and seen, my worldview started to broaden. It started to become less rigid, more open. But that only happens if I provide the fertile ground for it to happen. And so that includes, this is one thing I'll leave, is connection before reason. And what I mean by that is if someone brings their opinion to me and I go straight to that's wrong or whatever, shuts down the conversation. And so many young people are so used to teachers and other people and parents relating to them in that dynamic. Like, I know right, you know wrong.
So true.
Right? So if I'm able to connect with them first through empathy, and that is by me trying to see things from your point of view, right? And really taking my time with it and going, okay, yeah, I see what you're doing there. I see what you're doing there. Yeah, is it this and that? And they go, yes, that's what it is. And I go, okay, great. You'll feel that connection. When that connection's there, then you can jump to reason, and you might challenge them. You might go, I'm going to challenge you. But even in challenging, your autonomy is still intact. I'm not trying to persuade you. There's no pressure behind what I'm saying. And this is very difficult because it means that I have to take responsibility for what the opinion that someone's sharing, the impact that's having on me. And teachers and parents, understandably, are going to find it very difficult at first to have these conversations because it might expose some stuff within them, that they haven't looked at. And that's why it really is a concerted effort here. It's not just on the boys. It's not just on the girls. It's not just on the parents. It's not just on the staff. It's not just on the men's workers that are going in there. It's, we're all a part of this, and it's difficult, but my goodness me, is it worth it? When I see the bravado drop and I see one of the boys actively engage and share their opinions and they feel excited, and yeah, it's worth it every time.
I can see how passionate you are about it as well. It's awesome. I'm going to end it on this. We ask this question at the end of every single podcast, and it's, if you have one piece of advice just to give to listeners and viewers of a lesson that you've been taught over your lifespan, what would that piece of advice be? Always hard to think of one. That's what everyone says.
Yeah, I would say that there's two sayings. I love sayings, and people can remember them. So I'll give they kind of link to one another. One of my favorite sayings when I was training was, healing isn't about feeling better. It's about getting better at feeling. And that really hit home. And so if you can find capacity to feel your feelings in a safe space, and if you don't feel you have that capacity, then support, hopefully, is always there for you, and you know that. But if you can find even just a little moment. Maybe it's when you're on that walk, just take your earbuds out and just see what it's like. Breathe, tune in, and just start that process. It's like a muscle. It's like a workout. And then when you get to that point where you feel safe enough to start opening up, there's a saying that really, really connects with me. And it's, I can't think my way to good action. I have to act my way to good thinking. And what I mean by that is that sometimes I can get like trapped in a fear response where I'm waiting for my thoughts and a feeling to say, yeah, go to that open mic night and play your song, right? But actually, it doesn't come. Mm-hmm. It doesn't come. And so sometimes I then go, right, do I have capacity to act on this? And I feel like, yes, now that I've got the support, great. Maybe I'll line up a support call afterwards, whatever it is, just to help me feel safe enough to step outside my comfort zone. And that is where I'm learning the life is that I want to live, because I'm here to thrive. And not everyone is, and I understand, or not everyone values that, maybe, something like that. But I'm here to thrive. I know that. And thriving happens just outside my comfort zone. And I don't want to go too far out, because that might overwhelm me and destabilize me. But I want to go just far enough so that I'm out of my comfort zone and I'm alive.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
What an episode, Will. Thank you so much for coming on, my friend.
Thanks for coming on, mate.